We're going to be looking at a barbell back squat. We're going to be looking at the technical model that we as coaches need to use to apply a barbell back squat with the people that we work with. And then we're also going to look at a coaching model as well that we can apply to verbally cue the individual when they're performing a barbell back squat. So the technical model that we do this is we start with a top-down approach. So the bar is held high up on the trap. We rotate our elbows down to activate our scap, keep our chest out, our head in a neutral position. We would break simultaneously from the hip and the knee. Our knees would track out over our last two toes. So we have a little bit of external rotation happening at the hips. And then finally, our weight distribution is over all 3 points of our foot. So our baby toe, our big toe, and our heel. So that's our technical model. So Sam, if you want to jump in and perform a few reps so that we can start looking at how we perform this exercise. Good, so before you start there, so as we said, it's a high bar squat, which means the bar is held high up on the trap. That allows the bar to stay neutral as you're performing the movement. Elbows tucked down and back, chest out, head in a neutral position. That protects our spine. When Sam starts to move, he'll break at the same time or simultaneously in the hip, like he is right now. And as you can see, his knees are tracking out perfectly over his last two toes. Once our knees track out, this causes a little bit of tension at the hip. Stay strong at the bottom of the movement. And again, weight distribution on all 3 points of the foot as we're going through the movements. One of the things that we need to look out for when individuals are performing this movement is we want to make sure that there's not too much extension happening at the lumbar spine. So as Sam's going through the movement, he's got really good control at that lumbar spine, hence the depth he's able to get to. So that's one of the, that's all right, you can rack that there. So that's one of the markers that we look for to help us identify the height that the person would squat to, is when they start to extend at their lumbar spine. So that's the technical model. And what we're going to do now is we're going to look at how we would apply a coaching model to help cue the individual to perform the exercise better. So the coaching model that we have is, we like to use the analogy of corkscrewing your feet into the ground as you're performing the movement. So you would imagine trying to twist your feet into the ground. As you twist your feet into the ground, we get a little bit of external rotation on the hips, and that helps our knees track correctly out over our toes. Or alternatively, imagine you're trying to rip a piece of paper with your 2 feet. And again, that helps us create external rotation in the hips and helps our knees track out over our toes. So you can use either of those 2 cues, and then just asking the client or the individual to pick a point on the wall and stare at the wall and stare at that point as they go through the movement. That'll keep their chest up and their head in a neutral position. So Sam, you might jump in and go through the movement one more time. Good. So going over that technical model from a top-down approach. Head and chest in a neutral position, which is really important. That bar is pulled tight across Sam's back, and his elbows are locked down and back, which protects his spine. He breaks simultaneously from the knee and the hip, and then his knees are tracking in a perfect direction out over his last 2 toes, which helps with that external rotation in the hips and helps keep tension at the hips. Okay, rack that. One more point I want to cover here when it comes to back squatting. You might just turn around for a second. So when we squat, obviously the biggest junction in our body is our hips. So we need to make sure our hips are really, really stable. When we grip the bar, we want to try and pull that bar down towards our body. And this helps us engage our lats. And when we engage our right lat, you imagine there's an X that runs across our body. When we engage our right lat, it helps engage our left glute, and vice versa. When we engage our left lat, it helps us engage the right side or our right side glute. So imagine there's an X on the back of your body. By engaging that X and stabilizing your hips, the way you do that is pull the bar around your body so you create tension before you go through the movements. So things to consider from a safety standpoint when we're working with people is making sure that they don't have a posterior pelvic tilt when they're performing the exercise. So in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is we need to brace through our transverse abdominals and our core as we go through the movement. Height the individual will go to is dictated by that pelvic tilt that happens throughout the movement. So Sam, brace yourself and go through the movement. Good. And as we can see, Sam's height and his depth there is really, really good. And that's as a result of him having control over the hips, and he doesn't go near that pelvic tilt until the very end of the movement, at which point he stops. That's his height, and comes back out of the movement. Perfect.